In a small Tanzanian town, the sun rose over red earth and dusty roads. The air was filled with the smell of roasted corn from the market and the soft chatter of women selling fruits by the roadside. Among them was Amina, a young woman with a tired smile and hopeful eyes. She worked from morning until late evening, sewing dresses in her small shop at the corner of the main street. Her hands were quick, but her earnings were slow. Every day, she prayed that one day life would become easier for her family. Amina lived with her mother and two younger brothers in a small clay house at the edge of the town. Her father had passed away years ago, leaving her mother weak and worried. The roof of their house leaked when it rained, and sometimes they went to bed hungry. Amina carried all the weight on her shoulders. She dreamed of a better life, but dreams alone could not fill their stomachs. One afternoon, while she was fixing a torn school uniform, she heard the sound of heavy trucks passing. Dust filled the air, and she saw men wearing helmets and bright vests working on the new road outside the town. Everyone talked about the road project. It was being built by a Chinese company. Some people were happy because there would be jobs. Others were worried that the foreigners would take advantage of the locals. Amina didn't think much about it at first. She just hoped someone might need new uniforms or shirts and come to her shop. A few days later, a tall man with kind eyes entered her shop. He spoke in slow English, trying to make sure she understood. "Hello," he said politely, smiling a little awkwardly. "Can you make clothes?" "Yes, I can," Amina replied shyly, wiping her hands on her apron. The man introduced himself as Li Wei. He was from China and worked as a project manager for the road construction. He wanted some shirts made for his workers. Amina agreed, and they talked about fabric, price, and delivery. Though his Swahili was broken, he tried to greet people with respect. The townsfolk found it amusing, but also charming. When Amina delivered the shirts a few days later, Li Wei was impressed by her skill and dedication. He thanked her warmly and asked her to sit for tea. At first, Amina hesitated. It wasn't common for her to sit and chat with a foreign man. But he seemed gentle, and his smile was honest. They talked about work, family, and food. Li Wei told her that he had left his family behind in China to chase business dreams. Amina listened quietly. She told him about her late father and her struggles. Over the next few weeks, Li Wei visited her shop often. Sometimes to order more clothes, sometimes just to talk. He would bring her small gifts, tea leaves, fabric, or sweets from the city. Amina began to notice the way people whispered when they saw them together. Some said she was lucky, others said she was foolish. But Amina tried to ignore them. One evening, as the sun turned the sky orange, Li Wei came to her shop with a serious face. He told her he admired her strength and kindness. He said he wanted to take care of her, to make her life easier. Then he asked her to marry him. Amina was shocked. Her heart raced. She barely knew this man, and yet he was offering her the one thing she had longed for: security. Her mother's health was failing, and her brothers needed school fees. She could not remember the last time she felt safe or comfortable. But she also knew this was not love. It was a deal between comfort and emotion. That night, Amina lay awake thinking. She remembered her father's words before he died: "Life will test you. Sometimes you must choose what feels right, not what looks easy." But what was right anymore? Hunger had a way of silencing the heart. She thought of her mother coughing through the night and her brothers walking barefoot to school. Tears filled her eyes. The next morning, she met Li Wei under the old mango tree near her shop. He waited with flowers in his hand and hope in his eyes. Amina took a deep breath and said yes. Their wedding was simple. The town was curious. A local woman marrying a foreigner was rare. Some celebrated, others whispered. Amina's mother cried tears of both pride and worry. Li Wei paid for the ceremony, bought her a golden ring, and promised to build her a new home. When the ceremony ended, Amina smiled for the first time in a long while, though her heart trembled quietly inside her chest. After the wedding, Amina moved into Li Wei's house, a large building near the project site. It was the first time she slept in a bed that didn't creak, with lights that stayed on all night. She no longer worried about food or rent. Her brothers now had books, shoes, and school uniforms. Her mother received medicine and a soft blanket. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But as the weeks passed, Amina began to feel a strange emptiness. Li Wei worked long hours and came home tired. He was kind but distant. They ate dinner together in silence, and he often fell asleep before saying good night. Amina filled her days with housework and phone calls to her family, but loneliness followed her everywhere. The big house felt like a golden cage, shiny but cold. Sometimes, she sat by the window and watched the sunset over the dusty town. She missed the noise of the market, the laughter of her friends, and the sound of children playing. She thought about how she had once laughed freely, even in poverty. Now she had everything she wanted, except happiness. One afternoon, she walked to her old shop. The door was closed, the sign faded. Her sewing machine was still inside, covered in dust. Amina ran her hand over it and smiled sadly. A young girl passing by waved at her and said, "You're so lucky, Amina. You have a rich husband now." Amina smiled and nodded, but her heart felt heavy. As she walked back home, she realized something. She had traded her freedom for comfort, her laughter for silence. Still, she told herself she would try to make it work. Maybe love would grow with time. Maybe Li Wei would open his heart once he felt more at home in Tanzania. That night, as she sat alone at the dinner table waiting for Li Wei to return from work, Amina looked at her wedding ring and whispered softly to herself, "Money can buy peace for the body, but not for the heart." Outside, the crickets sang, and the moon rose over the quiet house. Amina didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing: her story had only just begun. Amina's new life began with brightness and comfort she had never known before. The house Li Wei brought her to was large, painted white, with tall windows and a beautiful garden full of flowers she did not even know the names of. There was electricity all the time, water that flowed from shiny taps, and a kitchen full of food from different countries. For the first few weeks, Amina walked around the house in wonder. It was quiet, cool, and clean, a world far away from the dusty roads of her small town. Her mother and brothers often called, laughing with excitement. "Amina, you live like a queen now," her mother said one evening over the phone. "Your father would be proud of you." Her brothers talked about how their classmates admired them because their sister had married a foreigner. Amina smiled and said she was happy, but after the calls ended, silence filled the big house once again. Li Wei was kind, but he was always busy. He woke up early before sunrise, dressed in his work clothes, and left for the construction site. He came home late, tired and quiet, often still on the phone speaking Chinese or English words Amina could not understand. She tried to wait for him at dinner, but many nights she ate alone. At first, Amina told herself it was only temporary. She thought he would spend more time with her when the road project was done. She kept the house clean, cooked his favorite meals, and learned how to make Chinese rice and dumplings from YouTube videos. When he came home, she would greet him with a smile, but he usually just nodded and said, "Thank you, Amina," before going to shower or check his emails. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The excitement of her new life began to fade. The house that once felt magical now felt too big and too quiet. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the hallways. She missed the laughter of her neighbors, the noise of the market, and the friendly voices that used to greet her every morning. Now, even the birds outside seemed to sing too softly. One afternoon, Amina sat in the garden, watching the wind move through the flowers. The gardener, an older man named Musa, came by to water the plants. He smiled warmly at her. "Madam, you don't go out much," he said softly. "It is good to see people sometimes. You will get bored staying here every day." Amina nodded and smiled faintly. "Yes, maybe I will go to town soon," she replied. But she knew it wasn't so simple. When she told Li Wei once that she wanted to visit her old shop and see her friends, he said, "Be careful, Amina. Some people may talk badly about you now. You are my wife, and I don't want you to be hurt by gossip." She had agreed then, but deep down she missed her old freedom. In her village, she could walk anywhere, talk to anyone, laugh loudly without fear of judgment. Now, even laughter felt heavy. A few weeks later, she decided to go anyway. One Saturday morning, when Li Wei was at work, she took a small taxi into town. People stared when they saw her. She wore nice clothes, a shiny handbag, and looked different from before. Some greeted her kindly, others whispered. She walked past her old shop, where another woman now sold second-hand clothes. The sewing machine she had once used still sat by the door. For a moment, Amina felt tears in her eyes. She walked through the market, bought some mangoes, and chatted with old friends. It felt good to hear their voices again, to speak Swahili without thinking. But when she mentioned her husband, the tone of their voices changed. "So, Amina, how is married life with your Chinese man?" one of them asked teasingly. "It's fine," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "He works a lot, but he is a good man." Her friend laughed. "Ah, you are lucky. If I were you, I would just enjoy that house and forget this dusty market." Amina laughed too, but inside, she felt the emptiness growing. She realized that even though she now had everything she had once dreamed of, clothes, food, and comfort, she had lost something more important: connection. When she returned home that evening, Li Wei was already there. He looked upset. "Where did you go?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "I went to the market, to see my old friends," Amina said quietly. "You should tell me before you go," he replied, rubbing his forehead. "I was worried. I called you and you didn't answer." Amina lowered her head. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to feel normal again." Li Wei sighed. "I understand. But people here talk. I don't want them to misunderstand us." She nodded, but his words stung. She went to her room and cried softly that night. For the first time, she felt like a bird in a golden cage, safe, fed, but trapped. The next morning, she woke up early and went outside. The sky was pink with dawn. She stood barefoot on the cool grass and closed her eyes. She could hear the distant sounds of roosters and the hum of trucks from the construction site. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is the price of peace. Maybe comfort always comes with silence." Li Wei came out later, holding a cup of coffee. He looked at her and smiled gently. "The garden looks nice," he said. Amina nodded. "Yes. It's beautiful, but sometimes it feels too quiet." He paused for a moment and then said, "I know. My life has also become quiet. I miss my family in China. But I am here now, trying to make things better." His words softened her heart a little. She realized he was also lonely in his own way. They were two strangers under one roof, both missing their worlds. That evening, Amina cooked a Tanzanian meal, pulao rice with chicken and spices. She invited Li Wei to eat with her. He smiled when he tasted it. "This is very good," he said. "Better than restaurant food." They ate together for the first time in weeks. Amina told him stories about her village, and he told her about his hometown in China. For a few moments, laughter returned to the table. It was not much, but it was a start. After dinner, Amina went to the garden and looked up at the stars. The night breeze touched her face gently. She thought about her life, how quickly it had changed, how far she had come. She realized that happiness was not something that could be bought or built like a house. It had to grow slowly, like a seed, with care and understanding. She whispered to herself, "Maybe one day, this golden cage will become a real home." The stars twinkled above, silent and bright, as if they were listening. The evening was quiet, and the house glowed softly under the warm light of the living room lamps. Amina sat near the window, sewing a torn shirt while the clock ticked on the wall. The wind outside carried the sound of crickets and the faraway laughter of children playing. Li Wei was in his study, speaking on the phone. She could hear his voice but not his words. It was common for him to have long calls late at night, often in Chinese, and Amina had grown used to the sound of his language flowing like music she could not understand. But that night felt different. His tone was softer, more emotional. He rarely spoke like that. The call went on for a long time, and Amina noticed he had not closed the study door completely. Curiosity tugged at her heart. She stood up quietly, her bare feet making no sound on the floor. As she drew closer to the half-open door, she heard Li Wei's voice, low, tired, and filled with something she could not name. "Mama," he said in English, which Amina could understand, "I did what you asked. I married a good woman, and people respect me here. The company trusts me more now." There was a long pause, and then a voice on the other end spoke, soft but firm, the voice of an older woman. Amina could only catch parts of it. "You are the oldest son, Wei. It is time you show responsibility. Marriage gives a man respect. You made the right choice. Li Wei sighed deeply. Yes, but I didn't marry for love, Mama. I married to make things easier. For business, for the company, for the family name. Amina is kind, but she does not know my heart. I don't even know if I know it anymore. The words hit Amina like a wave of cold water. She froze, her hands trembling. She pressed herself quietly against the wall, afraid to move or breathe. Her chest felt heavy. Each word seemed to echo in her ears. I didn't marry for love. She had known, deep down, that their marriage was built on need, not emotion. But hearing it said aloud broke something inside her. She wanted to step into the room and ask him why he never told her, but her legs refused to move. She felt small, invisible, and foolish. Li Wei continued speaking. She is a good woman, Mama. She works hard, she tries to understand me. But we come from two different worlds. Sometimes I don't know what to say to her. I wish things were different. His mother's voice came again, firm and motherly. In time, love will come, Wei. You are doing your duty. Family comes first. Amina turned away quietly and walked back to her room. The light from the moon shone through the window, making her shadow stretch across the floor. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes full of tears she didn't want to let fall. She looked at her wedding ring, gold and beautiful, and felt how heavy it suddenly seemed on her finger. She thought about the day she said yes to him, about how she had convinced herself it was the right choice. Now she saw the truth. She was not the only one who married for reasons other than love. They were both trapped, just in different ways. She had done it for survival. He had done it for expectation. The next morning, she woke up early but stayed quiet. When Li Wei came to breakfast, she smiled as usual, though her heart was breaking. He didn't notice the sadness in her eyes. He talked about work and how they would soon finish the first part of the road. Amina nodded and poured him tea. The silence between them was louder than ever. After he left for work, Amina walked to the garden. The sun was rising, painting the sky gold. She sat on the bench under the mango tree and closed her eyes. For the first time, she didn't know what to feel, anger, pain, or understanding. She wanted to be angry with him, but deep down, she couldn't. He, too, was a prisoner of his world, bound by family duty and pressure she could not fully understand. Days passed, and Amina carried the secret in her heart. She no longer waited by the door for Li Wei to come home. She no longer asked about his day or cooked his favorite meals. Instead, she spent more time helping people in the neighborhood, teaching young girls how to sew, helping a neighbor with her newborn baby, or visiting her mother on weekends. The more she gave her time to others, the lighter she felt. One evening, Li Wei returned home early. He found Amina sitting in the garden, surrounded by fabrics and colorful threads. She was smiling softly as she stitched a school uniform. "You've been busy," he said, sitting beside her. "Yes," she replied simply. "It feels good to use my hands again." He nodded. "You always make beautiful things." Amina looked at him quietly. She wanted to ask him about that night, about the call to his mother, but something stopped her. Instead, she said, "Li Wei, are you happy here?" He looked surprised by the question. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I came here to build something for my company. I didn't expect to build a life." Amina nodded. "I understand." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a bit of sadness in his eyes. "And you? Are you happy, Amina?" She thought for a moment before answering. "I used to think happiness was money and comfort. But now I think it's peace. Some days I have peace, some days I don't." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, not love, but truth. They both understood what the other carried inside. Later that night, Amina lay awake again. She thought about her life, her choices, and the strange twist of fate that brought her here. Maybe they were meant to meet, not as lovers, but as two souls learning from each other. She realized she did not need his love to find her own strength. The next morning, she decided to start a small project in the community, teaching women to sew and earn money on their own. Li Wei was surprised but agreed to help her find a place. Though they still spoke little at home, something between them began to shift. There was new respect, quiet but real. One night, a few weeks later, Li Wei found Amina working late, drawing designs on paper. He watched her for a moment before saying, "You are strong, Amina. I don't say it often, but I admire that." Amina looked up and smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why we were brought together," she said softly. "To learn strength in different ways." He nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "Maybe you are right." They stood there in silence, the air filled with understanding. Amina realized that even though they might never share a deep romantic love, there was something else, a bond built from honesty and shared pain. That night, she sat by the window again, looking at the moon. The hurt was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She whispered to herself, "He didn't marry me for love, and I didn't marry him for love either. But maybe life wanted us to teach each other what love really means. Not possession, not comfort, but truth." The wind blew softly through the curtains, carrying away her sadness little by little. Amina closed her eyes and smiled, knowing that even in her golden cage, she had found a piece of freedom, the freedom of understanding. The sun rose slowly over the small Tanzanian town, painting the sky with soft orange light. Amina stood at the balcony of the big White House, watching the workers move like tiny dots along the road project below. For the first time in many months, she felt calm. Something inside her had changed since the night she heard Li Wei's secret. She no longer felt angry or broken. Instead, she felt a quiet understanding. Both of them had come into this marriage with different wounds, and maybe it was time to heal, not with words, but with action. That morning, she made breakfast and waited for Li Wei to come downstairs. When he did, he looked surprised to see her smiling. "You're up early," he said gently. "I thought I could visit the construction site today," Amina replied. "I want to see the work you do." Li Wei hesitated for a moment. He had never invited her there before. The site was busy, noisy, and full of men. But seeing the calm determination in her eyes, he nodded. "All right. I'll take you." Amina dressed simply, wearing a long blue dress and a headscarf. When they reached the site, the workers turned to look at her curiously. Many of them were local men, drivers, masons, and helpers, who had only seen her from a distance. She greeted them in Swahili with a warm smile. "Habari za asubuhi," she said cheerfully. The men responded with respect, surprised that the boss's wife spoke to them kindly. As Li Wei showed her around, she noticed how some workers seemed uneasy around him. They followed orders, but they did not talk much. She could sense a wall between them, not made of bricks, but of fear and misunderstanding. Most of the workers didn't speak English or Chinese, and Li Wei didn't know much Swahili. So when problems came up, people often stayed silent instead of explaining. Later that day, as they drove home, Amina said softly, "Li Wei, maybe they don't understand you. It's not that they don't want to work. They just need someone to listen." He glanced at her. "You think so?" "Yes," she said. "Let me help. I can talk to them. I can explain things in a way they understand." Li Wei thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Let's try." From the next day, Amina began visiting the site regularly. She spent time talking to the workers, asking about their families, and translating Li Wei's instructions when needed. Soon, the atmosphere began to change. The workers started smiling more, working faster, and even joking during breaks. Amina often brought tea and snacks to share with them, and they started calling her Mama Amina, a title of respect in their culture. Li Wei watched all this quietly. He was surprised at how easily she connected with people. Where he saw barriers, she built bridges. One afternoon, when a delivery truck broke down and caused delay, the workers grew restless. Amina calmed them with gentle words, assuring them that the problem would be fixed. Later, Li Wei said, "You have a gift, Amina. People listen to you." She smiled. "They listen because I listen to them first." Li Wei thought about those words for a long time. Weeks passed, and Amina's presence changed not only the workers but also Li Wei himself. He began asking about the people he worked with, their families, their stories, their lives. He started learning simple Swahili words, often practicing with Amina in the evenings. Sometimes he got the pronunciation wrong, and they both laughed until tears came. Slowly, the silence that had once filled their house began to fade. One evening, Li Wei returned home late but not tired. He found Amina sitting in the garden under the mango tree, sewing by lantern light. "You should rest," he said softly. She smiled. "I will. But I'm finishing this for one of the workers' wives. Her child needs a school uniform." Li Wei looked at her with quiet admiration. "You care so much for everyone." Amina shrugged lightly. "When people feel cared for, they do better. You've given them work, now they just need to feel seen." He nodded thoughtfully, sitting beside her. "I used to think business was only about progress, money, results, numbers. But maybe it's about people too." Amina smiled. "Everything is about people, Li Wei." From that night, something in him softened. He began inviting the workers to small gatherings, serving food and sharing stories. Amina helped him plan everything, teaching him local customs, like how to greet elders properly, how to eat ugali with his hands, and how to use a kitenge cloth as a gift of respect. The workers started calling him Bwana Li, and laughter returned to the sight. For the first time, Li Wei felt truly accepted. And for the first time, Amina saw him not as a stranger, but as a man trying to find his place in a foreign land. One afternoon, a sudden rainstorm hit the town. The workers rushed to cover materials, but one of the trucks got stuck in the mud. Without thinking, Amina ran forward to help. Her dress got soaked, her hands muddy, but she laughed as she worked beside the men. Li Wei stood watching, amazed. When she turned to look at him, their eyes met, and for a brief moment, there was something new there. Not the cold distance of duty, but the warmth of respect. Later that evening, as they sat by the fire to dry off, Li Wei said quietly, "You've done more for this project than I ever could. You brought everyone together." Amina shook her head. "No, Li Wei. We did it together. You listened." He smiled for the first time in a long while, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Maybe I'm learning from you." Days turned into months, and the road project neared completion. The once empty land was now alive with movement, trucks, people, and laughter. When the local chief came to see the work, he praised both Li Wei and Amina. "You have not just built a road," he said proudly. "You have built friendship between two worlds." That night, they hosted a small dinner to celebrate. The workers danced, and Amina joined them, her laughter echoing across the garden. Li Wei watched her, smiling quietly. She looked radiant, not because of wealth or comfort, but because she had found purpose again. When the celebration ended and the stars filled the sky, Li Wei turned to her. "Amina," he said softly, "when I came here, I thought I would build only roads. But you helped me build something greater, understanding." Amina looked at him with kind eyes. "And I thought I married only for money. But life gave me something greater too, meaning." They stood in silence, side by side, watching the stars. For the first time, there was no wall between them, only peace. In the days that followed, Amina continued her work with the women in the community, teaching them sewing and small business skills. Li Wei supported her by helping build a small workshop. They still came from different worlds, but now those worlds touched in small, gentle ways. Sometimes, when they walked through town together, people greeted them warmly, "Mama Amina," "Bwana Li," and they both smiled. The town no longer saw them as outsiders or symbols of wealth, but as part of the community. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Amina looked at the road stretching far into the horizon. It was smooth and strong, just like the bridge they had built between them. She turned to Li Wei and said quietly, "Maybe this is what love looks like, not something that happens all at once, but something we build slowly, one step at a time." Li Wei nodded, his eyes soft with gratitude. "Yes," he whispered, "brick by brick, heart by heart." And in that moment, they both knew, the golden cage had turned into a home, and two strangers had learned to understand each other's hearts. Years passed, and the once dusty road through the Tanzanian town now stretched wide and strong, lined with small shops, farms, and houses. Children played along its edges, their laughter floating through the air like music. It was a road that had changed the lives of many, and among those lives were Amina's and Li Wei's. Their home, once silent and cold, had become warm and full of life. The walls no longer echoed with loneliness. Instead, they carried the sounds of visitors, friends, and the hum of activity. Amina had turned part of their land into a small training center for young women. Every morning, girls arrived with bright eyes and eager hearts, ready to learn sewing, tailoring, and simple business skills. Some came from nearby villages, others from faraway places, all hoping for a chance to build a better life. Li Wei, now calmer and wiser, supported her in every way he could. He built a new classroom with strong walls and big windows that let in the morning light. He also helped design simple tables and sewing benches. Though he still worked on business projects, he now spent more time helping Amina's dream grow. Amina often looked at him and wondered how much both of them had changed. She remembered the young woman she once was, scared, desperate, and unsure. Now she stood tall, teaching others with confidence and peace. She no longer felt like a woman who had married for money. She felt like someone who had found purpose. One morning, as the girls sat in the classroom sewing uniforms for the nearby school, Amina walked among them, giving advice and sharing stories. "When I first started sewing," she told them, "I used to think it was just a way to survive. But now I know, when you create something with your hands, you also create a future." The girls listened carefully, nodding with smiles. After the class ended, Amina stepped outside and saw Li Wei talking with some villagers. He was helping them plan a new water system using the company's leftover equipment. The sight made her heart feel full. This man, who had once been so distant and quiet, now laughed easily with locals, greeting them in Swahili and learning from them as well. That evening, as they sat together under the mango tree, Amina said softly, "You've changed, Li Wei. The people love you now." He smiled. "Maybe it's because I learned from you. You taught me how to listen." Amina laughed. "And you taught me how to build. Not just roads, but dreams." They both sat quietly, watching the sunset turn the sky orange and pink. The same mango tree where Amina once said yes to a marriage of survival now stood as a witness to something real, a partnership built through time, patience, and understanding. One weekend, Amina and Li Wei invited the community for a small celebration. It was the 5th anniversary of their training school. Women came dressed in colorful dresses, bringing gifts of fruit and flowers. The girls performed songs and dances, thanking Amina for teaching them. Some had already started their own tailoring shops. Others were working as designers in town. As Amina stood to give a short speech, her voice trembled with emotion. "When we started this school," she said, "I wanted to help women like me, women who had dreams but no chance. Today, seeing your success gives me more joy than any gold or gift. True wealth is not what we keep, but what we share." The crowd clapped and cheered. Li Wei stood beside her, his eyes full of quiet pride. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, they sat outside again. Fireflies sparkled in the dark garden, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Amina turned to him and said, "Do you remember when we first met? I said yes because I was afraid of poverty. I thought money would fix everything." Li Wei nodded slowly. "And I married you because I wanted to please my family and build respect. I thought success was the same as happiness." Amina smiled gently. "We were both wrong. But life taught us better." He looked at her, the glow of the lantern lighting her face. "You know," he said softly, "when I first came to this country, I thought I was bringing progress. But now I see, you were the one who taught me what progress really means. It's not in buildings or roads. It's in people." Amina reached out and touched his hand. "And I learned that love doesn't always begin with a feeling. Sometimes it grows slowly, like a seed. We didn't plan it, but it found us." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft breeze moving through the trees. There was peace between them, not the kind bought by money, but the kind earned through time, understanding, and kindness. The next day, Amina visited the school early. A group of new students had arrived, carrying bags of fabric and notebooks. She welcomed them warmly. "Here, we don't just learn sewing," she told them. "We learn courage. We learn to make something beautiful from little things, just like life." As the girls laughed and began their work, Li Wei watched from a distance. He saw how Amina moved among them, encouraging, smiling, and teaching with patience. He realized that her strength was not loud or forceful, but gentle and steady, like water shaping a stone over time. That afternoon, Li Wei asked one of the girls to sew a special banner. It read, Work with your hands, love with your heart, and build with your soul. When the banner was finished, he hung it over the classroom door. Amina smiled when she saw it. "That's beautiful," she said. "It's what you taught me," he replied. As months passed, the school became well known across the region. Women who once had no hope now had businesses of their own. Some sent their children to school with the money they earned. Others returned to thank Amina with gifts they had made. Each time, Amina would say, "Don't thank me. Just help someone else one day. That is how we keep the chain of kindness alive." One evening, a storm passed over the town, and the rain poured heavily. Amina and Li Wei sat inside, listening to the rain hit the roof. Li Wei turned to her and said, "Do you ever miss your old life, before everything changed?" Amina thought for a moment. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity," she said. "But I don't miss the struggle. I don't miss the fear. I am grateful for where we are, not because of what we own, but because of what we've become." He nodded. "Yes. We started with nothing real, but now we have something that money can't buy." When the rain stopped, they stepped outside. The air was cool and fresh, and the earth smelled sweet. A rainbow stretched across the sky, glowing softly over the road they had once built together. Amina looked at it and said, "That road was our beginning. We built it for others, but maybe it was meant for us too, a road that led us to understanding." Li Wei smiled and wrapped his arm gently around her shoulders. "And it still leads forward," he said. "There's more to build, more to give." They stood together, watching the rainbow fade into the clouds. For a long time, neither spoke. There was no need. Their silence was no longer empty, it was full of peace. Years later, when people spoke of them, they didn't talk about the wealth they had or the big house they lived in. They talked about how Amina and Li Wei changed lives. How they built bridges between two worlds and showed that love could grow even from the most unlikely beginnings. And every morning, as the school bell rang and laughter filled the air, Amina smiled, knowing that true riches were not found in gold or luxury, but in giving, in growing, and in the quiet joy of changing another person's life.